Everybody, welcome back. My name is Steven. I run Madison Home Performance. We do home diagnosis. We do building science testing on houses and HVAC design. I want to share with you a story about one of my clients, something that I ran into, in hopes that this will help somebody out there who's facing something similar. So, here goes. Most houses in the Midwest have what's called a forced air system. So their HVAC system, heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, is a forced air system that runs on natural gas, also called methane, right? So basically, gas is piped into the house to your furnace where the combustion reaction happens, and then there's a big blower fan in the bottom of that metal box in your basement. And then that blower fan pushes air over a hot, glowing piece of metal. And the heat that's in that piece of metal transfers to the airstream, and then that air gets pushed through your ductwork throughout the house in what's called your supply ducts. So if we were to use a cardiovascular analogy, the heart of your HVAC system is that metal box in the basement. It's called the air handler, and it has the heat exchanger in there too. So it's got the blower fan in there, and that piece of metal that gets really hot, and it has the burners. That's where the combustion reaction happens. And then the arteries, the things that go away from the heart, that's the supply ductwork. And then the veins, the things that bring the colder air back to the furnace to get reheated, that's the return ductwork. Okay, so you got the heart, the arteries, and the veins. Now, when we are concerned about hot and cold rooms in a house, we care about the size of the heart and if there's any blockages in the arteries and in the veins, okay? Now, let me transfer to talk about my client here. This is a client up in northern Wisconsin. I drove up to their house for a day to do a bunch of home performance diagnosis. Basically, on like a doctor visit for their house. And they were saying that they had mold behind their drywall and they had mold in their ducts. Okay? Mold in the drywall and mold in the ducts. And they had brought up some mold specialists from Texas. They had brought in a mold dog who found mold behind walls and was sitting on all the duck boots, like indicating that the dog smelled mold. They had brought in some scientific experts. A lot of people that are experts in their fields came in to look at this situation. The situation was so bad that this family who had moved into this beautiful house, they had been in there less than 6 months, and the mother had gotten so ill that they had to move out of the house. They were not they're not the original owners of the house, but they moved out, and she was with child too, so she had to get better, move out. She's since had a baby, and everything is hunky dory there. But what a complete bummer to buy a house and then have to move out months later because the house is making you sick, right? Nausea and nervous system issues, congestion, stuffiness, headaches, blurred vision, all these things, right? And then you bring in all these experts that are finding mold all over, and you're like, what the heck is going on? This is an expensive, nice house. How can we be having these issues? So I come up, right? And I'm looking around and doing a bunch of things like a blower door test. I'm doing zonal pressure testing. I'm testing airflows on the HVAC system. I'm doing thermal scanning, all this stuff. So I found two major things that are causing this mold issue in the house. First, I put a blower door in the front door of the house and turned it on. A blower door is a big fan that sucks all of the air that's in the house out the front door. Once I turn on the blower door, I am depressurizing the house so that all the air that's going out the front door is coming in through all the little gaps and cracks and leaks, maybe around the windows or behind the walls or wherever. Then I use a thermal imaging camera to see where the air is coming in. And this is what I found. When you walk into the front door of the house, they have this beautiful wooden curved stairwell that goes from the first floor up to the second floor. And it's a nice big curved wall. Well, that wall lit up a very bright color to indicate that there is warm air in the attic that was being drawn down behind that wall into the house. So I went up into the attic, climbed up there, moved up the attic hatch, got up in there, and I looked, and I moved aside the insulation, and I saw a hole below the insulation so big that I could fit my whole body in that hole. In other words, the attic space, the unconditioned vented attic, had a hole in it where you could drop like people from the attic down into the wall that went next to the stairs from the second floor down to the first floor. A huge gaping hole. So what I'm saying is there's an interior wall that's inside the house that's completely connected to the attic. So your interior walls are actually outside the house. I'll say that again. Major interior walls are actually outside the house. So what's happening is in the summertime, all this warm, moist air, because the stack effect, is getting drawn down this cavity that's inside that's outside the house. It's getting drawn down this cavity, and then this warm, moist air is condensing on the back of the drywall, right in the middle of the house. And all this drywall that where the dog was sitting and where the dog was hitting on, and where there was high mold content, was in the same cavity where there's this huge hole up to the attic. Again, so the warm, moist air is coming down and condensing on the back of the drywall, and this is the center wall in the main part of the house. And it's all because that cavity has got a huge, huge open hole to the attic. So it's like that whole space, it's like attic. Okay? Second big thing that we found. Let's talk about the HVAC system. Let's go back to our analogy of the heart, the arteries, and the veins. When the system runs, the supply ducts get pressurized, right? Because the blower fan is going like this. And it's pushing air through the supply ducts. So if there were any holes in my supply ducts and I lit a match and put it by the hole, the flame would flicker and probably go out because there's air shooting out those supply ducts wherever there's an open hole, right? So the supply ducts are pressurized, and in return, the return ducts are depressurized because air is trying to suck back through the return ductwork back to the heart of the system, which is down there in the basement. Well, all of the return ductwork is actually panned, meaning this house uses the walls as the return ductwork. I'll say that again. The house uses the interior walls and some exterior walls as the returns. So these are the ducts that are bringing air back to the furnace. So what's happening? Well, we have return ductwork. Wherever we have return ductwork, when the system is running, the return ductwork gets depressurized. And we're literally using wall cavities to suck air back down to the furnace. Well, the walls that we're using, or those cavities in the walls, they're actually connected to the attic. I'm going to say this slowly. The return cavities that get depressurized when we run the system, that are sucking air back down, are connected to the attic. So when we depressurize that space, we're actually drawing air from the attic. We're drawing air from the attic down to the HVAC system. So we're drawing warm, moist air from the attic into our wall cavity returns. And again, when warm, moist air comes down and hits cold surfaces, we get condensation and we can have microbial growth. So basically what I'm saying, our second big issue, is our ductwork is connected to the attic. Huge no. That's the source, the second main source of this issue. Our ductwork is connected to the attic. So we get warm, moist air that pulls into our return ducts. It goes through the HVAC system, the heart down in the basement, and then it gets pushed out through all the supply ducts. So our duct system now has become compromised. Even the heart of the system has become compromised because the duct system is connected to the attic through our return ducts, right? So those are the two biggest issues that this house was facing. And just to add some numbers to this, when I did something called a pressure pan test or a zonal pressure test on one of the return vents in the master bedroom, that return vent was over 20% connected to the attic, which means a large percent of the air that is being drawn back to the furnace from that room is not coming just from the room. It's being drawn from the attic down that stud bay cavity and back to the furnace. So what's the fix for all this stuff? The first fix is to go up into the attic to remove all of the insulation and to completely and 100% air seal the attic plane. That is an imperative. That is a must. We need that puppy as airtight as possible. Well, geez, Stephen, how do I know that the contractor's going to do a good job? Get them to do what's called a post-test blower door. I did the pre-test when I came there to do all this building diagnostics. Now get them to do a post-test. And when they do a post-test, maybe they'll walk around with an infrared camera to verify that attic plane really is now airtight. But that is one of the most, if not the most important place in a house to air seal. The attic plane must be 100% airtight. So, just one last recap on all this stuff. If you have mold issues in your house, make sure there are no large, obvious holes in your attic plane. And number two, if you are using your walls as your return ductwork for your forced air system, make sure that the attic plane and all of the top plates in the attic plane are totally sealed. You're going to use a 1 or 2 part closed cell spray foam. I've dropped some pictures in here that I hope are helpful. If you need to consult with me for an hour, please check out my website. I'm happy to help.